Hello and welcome back to the PHP beginner course. So this is an introduction to PHP arrays. So here we're going to have a look at the indexed array, associative array, and the multidimensional array. An array is a variable or data structure containing multiple values. So the array lets us manage multiple values by using only one variable. So let's see this in action. So take this example here, we have 3 names and 3 variables. Once, for example, we scale this up, you can imagine we need multiple variables for multiple names. So the array allows us to have multiple values in one variable. So in PHP, we define an array using the array function. So here we have an example of an array. We have the variable name, and then we utilize the array function. Each element is separated by a comma, and of course we're using strings, so we use the double quotes. Now this is an example of a PHP indexed array. So all elements in this array are represented by an index number, which importantly you need to remember starts with 0. So here I echo out I like and then the person. So I reference the array or the item or element I want to select by the number here. So 0 represents this element here, the first element. Number 1 would output Tommy and number 2 would output Jake. So let's just see that in action. So if I leave number 0 in person and then go back to the browser and try that, you can see that it says I like G. And if I then use number 1, so person 1, I'm now referencing Tommy. So now the browser should change, or the output should change, if I save it, to Tommy. So that's a simple example there of a PHP indexed array, and then how to access the array items. So it is possible to create or manually create an indexed array. So here at the top we have person 0, position 0 equals Alex, person 1 equals Jamie, and then person 2 equals Ellie. So this is exactly the same as writing it in this way. So let's just try and access some of these new properties or new elements. So person 0 should output Alex. There we go. So that's just another way of manually creating an indexed array in PHP. Working with arrays, it can be important to understand how many items are in the array. So here we have the count function, which allows us to select the array and count the items within the array. So let's just see how many items this produces. So if we echo out the array length now, we can see we return 3. That obviously represents the amount of items in the array here, 1, 2, 3. So here we have a simple example of accessing the array and outputting all the items one by one onto the screen. So here we start with the variable x, and that equals 0. So this would represent the fact that the first time this loops around, then this first item would be displayed. So while x is less than the array length, which is 3, then this will keep looping around, outputting all the information. Because obviously once we get to less than 3, so number 2, we've entered or we've outputted all the items. Because remember here we're going to have 0, 1 and 2. So when x equals 2, we finish the loop. And of course every time we loop, we're going to increment or add 1 to x. So here we echo out the person, in this case whatever's stored or referenced in x, and then we echo out a break so that the items are placed on top of each other. So here we're going to echo out all the items in this array. So we'll see that in action, and we receive an error. So going back to my code, I've forgotten the curly bracer at the end. So I save that and then start again, and you can see now all the items are displayed on the screen. So that's just a simple example of now iterating over or outputting all the items from an array. So the second type of an array, an associative array, works with key value pairs. So here, for example, in the index array, remember we had numbers and they represent the position of the elements in the array, or they were referenced by numbers. The elements in the array were referenced by numbers. So in an associative array, we use strings or values to represent or to index information inside of the array. So this is a simple example of how to build an associative array. Here we have the name, and here we have the value. So here we have the name again, Paul, and the value is 10. So like the index array, there's two ways that we can create an associative array. So the manual way would look like this. So here we have to use the brackets and then the name and then the value. So here is an example of how you might echo out or print out information from this associative array. So notice here we reference, in this case, by the name, but what will get returned is the value. So here it will say Paul is, and then we reference Paul, but what will be placed here is the value, 10 years old. So if we see that in action, there we go. Obviously we can do the same with owl. So we change that to owl. What will get printed out here is 5 and not owl. So I save that and there we go. So here's a simple example of how to iterate through or loop through this array. So here we have age as x and then the x value. So here, if you like, we can reference this as this is x and this is the x value. So here we can echo out both the key, which is x, or the value. So if we see that in action, here we can iterate through the key equals owl, value 5, and so on. So we don't have to iterate through both. Obviously, if we just wanted the value, we would just need to echo the value. And there we go. So that's just a simple way of iterating over the array or printing out all the items from the associative array. So the last type of array type is the multidimensional array. So take, for example, this type of data. Most of the time we want to store more than one piece of information about an element. So here we have the age and the height of a person. So we can use a multi-dimensional array to store more items about a user in this case. So here's an example of developing this chart here as an array. So here you can see that we've defined each item in the array and the name and separated by a comma and then the value and then a comma and then the value again. Of course we can add more here to this multi-dimensional array because this is just a very simple two-dimensional array. Here we can add 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 and so on dimensions. So referencing or outputting information or elements in the array is very much like what we did with the indexed array. For here, for example, we echo person 0. So this 0 would represent Lee here. Now if we wanted to access more information within here, we need to then remember that Lee here has information 0, 1 and 2. So if we wanted to access more information or we wanted to access the age, then we would need to reference a new block here and this would be 0 and 1. So here we have 0 which represents Lee and then 1, so 0 and 1. So position 1. So here should now output 22. So if I wanted to output ours height, well, ours in position 0, 1, and the data is in position 0, 1, 2. So I put a 2 there, and now it should output 180. There we go. So we can access the multi-array in that way. Of course, we can make this into a 3-dimensional array. Just add some more data to make it a 3-dimensional array, and it works exactly the same way. So if I wanted this number from Lee is in position 0, and then the item is 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can now access that piece of information. There we go. So now to output the information in a loop, first of all, we need to loop through each section or each row. And then we go through each row. When we go through each row, we then need to loop over each element in the array. So first of all, we create a simple loop whereby we iterate over each row. And now we need another loop to iterate over each item in the array. So here we have the loop that's going to perform that action. So here we're going to loop over each row, and then in each row we're going to loop through each of the items in the row. So if we now output that onto the screen, you can see now we go through each row and then we output each item from the array rows. So once you've got a grasp of basic arrays, then you can start to consider what can you do in an array, or what can you do with an array. So take this example here. This is a function called sort. So here, if we take this array and I use print r, which allows me to print out the array. Here we are. So we can't just echo an array, we have to use print r. So you can see the order of this array. So here what we can do is use sort. So sort is a function that's going to take the array and put it into some sort of order. So here, for example, it's going to put it into ascending order. So if I print this out or refresh this, you can see now that the array has been sorted. So that's one of many different functions that you can perform on an array.